Hello, and welcome back to my historical adventures. Now, you notice this week I'm not outside. I'm actually in the office. That's because we're going to do something a little different. And that's to do with my new adventure online. I've been digging around the internet to try and find some really, really early ghost stories from ancient times and whatnot. And as well as that, I've been trying to find some really early examples of paranormal investigation. This is like a little pet project and see what I can find. So in my search, I've picked out a few stories of the many that I've found. But the first one is a story of a maiden by the name of Philinian. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but a maiden of that name who married the general of Alexander the Great. His name was Craterus, I believe. She married him, and 6 months after she died. But then she was strangely resurrected, and as the story goes, she came back and came to visit a young man in the house where she lived, by the name of Machates, and she continued to visit him in the night until she was discovered by her parents, where she explained that she'd been resurrected for a specific reason, but then shortly after died for a second time. Now, this story went by historian Kelly Shannon, and her response to this was more, I think, one of disbelief, just because of the way the storyteller Phlegon, he tries to authenticate the story as much as he can, like, really, this is real, yes. And she sort of elaborates that Roman literature is full of inexplicable creatures and occurrences, from centaurs to ghosts to volcanic eruptions and stuff. And it's authors like that and Pliny the Elder that they try and present such stories as true stories, stories that modern people would find very difficult or impossible to believe. I think the trouble here is, the thing to remember is that this culture was heavily influenced by religion. I mean, their lives revolved around the gods and what they perceive they wanted, and what they as a people wanted to do, but their minds were constantly sort of plagued by, oh, it's the gods, they want this and whatnot. They would pray to and ask for all sorts of things from the gods, which in turn it made them very open-minded towards wonderful and strange things like paranormal things or miracles and whatnot. But it also made them easier to be fooled, and for them to mistake something for spectacular or strange or miraculous when it was actually just quite a normal thing that was quite explainable. I think the next story I came across was of a philosopher named Athenodorus. Now, he went to Athens after hearing about a cheaply rentable house that he could get that nobody else would stay in, and that's why it was cheap, because the house itself was haunted and nobody would rent it because they were afraid of the ghost. So Athenodorus, he says, I'll take the house. He rents it and he stays in it, and that very night the ghost comes to him. He appears rattling chains, but then gestures to the man to follow him. So, of course, Athenodorus does, follows him outside to the courtyard where the ghost sharply disappears. The next day, Athenodorus goes to the local magistrate and gets the magistrate to unearth the spot where the ghost disappeared, only to find a body of a man wrapped in chains who hadn't been honoured properly. So, with that, Athenodorus and the magistrate, they decide to properly bury the man according to their traditions and their rituals, solving the problem. And this is kind of a typical type of story and haunting, and it's more of a prime reason for a spirit appearing generally than even maybe a spirit appearing asking to be avenged, which I find absolutely fascinating, because that type of haunting, I need help, it seems to still happen today, which to me would give that story maybe a little bit of weight. Not a lot, but a tiny bit of weight for me. But as I keep searching, I happened across stories of Chinese culture. They have a number of reasons for spirits to visit people. Again, not being buried properly. They died in battle somewhere, or they drowned. So they would appear in dreams. That's a common theme as well. But the story that actually struck me again was another philosopher, but this time by the name of Moti, apparently, who once argued in favour of accepting the report of the ghost of the minister by the name of Tu Po, I believe it was, returning from the afterlife to assassinate a king, apparently. And his reasoning was that if people could accept that a machine works without knowing how it works or why, or that people speak or behave in certain ways in another country without having been there, then they can believe the reports of ghosts from a person if they are proven to be credible, reliable, honourable and trusted in other areas of life, so that it should be accepted as reality in the same way, as well as, like accepting that one recognises and believes established history, or that they believe news reports of the day, even if they haven't experienced them themselves. So in the same way, if they haven't experienced a ghost themselves, they should still believe what this person is saying, which does kind of make sense. But it wasn't the only thing about Chinese culture to catch my eye. It was the fact that it started. This is heavily sort of influenced by their worship of their ancestors, and that they believe that they can still exert a powerful influence over their daily lives. But it was the talk of the Chinese Ghost Festival that happens in the 7th month, which is July. It's known as the Ghost Month, and it's because they think that the veil between the human world and the spirit realm is very thin during that month, so it makes it easier for them to cross over. And during this festival, people would leave out gifts and food and whatnot to honour them, in the hope that they'll remain in their spirit realm and not come over and trouble the living. Which, again, that actually has a lot of weight to it, because when we bury members of our family, or we bury pets or whatnot, we bury them with things. So that actually does make sense. Now, the next story that I came across is one of the most reported ghost sightings in England, and that's to do with Anne Boleyn. Because in 1536 she was executed in the Tower of London, accused of all sorts: witchcraft, treason, incest and adultery. I think it had slightly more to do with the fact that because she was Henry VIII's wife, he wanted a son. She didn't provide one, she provided a daughter instead, Elizabeth I. Henry VIII decided to do away with her. Now, Anne Boleyn's ghost is seen in quite a few locations, including her childhood home of Hever or Hever Castle, but she's also said to be seen at Blickling Hall. Now, Anne's ghost at Blickling Hall appears not on foot, but more so in a coach, a horse-drawn coach, driven by a headless horseman, and Anne herself is said to be headless herself inside the coach with a head on her lap, which is incredible in itself. But what's more incredible is that the ghost coach and coachman and Anne herself, they get to the front door, they disappear, which is absolutely incredible. I think I've seen a few instances of videos and pictures and what have you online, so you'll have to go and chase that up if you want to see it. But just as my time runs out, I think what strikes me with all these stories, even in the ancient times, those tales of ghosts and whatnot, is always that there's underlying knowledge there between the lines, whether you believe it or not. There's always that underlying knowledge of understanding that there are strange things there and why they could possibly appear, why they could happen. Even though that there is some fear, like in the story of Athenodorus, those people were afraid of going in that house or renting that house, and that there's a ghost of someone that's passed away, whether they're talking or just walking around and whatnot. But like Athenodorus, there are people that want to help. He went out and found out what was wrong and put it right. Like people like Mo Ti, the Chinese philosopher, who try not to just change people's point of view, but more just trying to open their minds. But what finished my search off, after learning all that, what finished it off was one of the most famous stories that we've all heard, which is the story of the Perron family and Ed and Lorraine Warren, which is the story of the film, true story of the film The Conjuring. Now, being a very, very famous story, of course, it's exactly the kind of thing I'm looking for as well. An early example of paranormal investigation and people trying to help. Now, it sort of started in 1971 for the Perron family when they moved into their 14-room farmhouse on Rhode Island, a wonderful farmhouse with a terrible secret. After moving in, it wasn't long before stuff started to happen. Don't worry, I am going to cut this short. It was small things at first, like objects moving or disappearing, scratching noises in places on the kettle and whatnot, piles of dirt appearing on the floor that had just been cleaned, to the children seeing spirits, some nice, some not so nice. But it was after a while when things started to sort of escalate that Carolyn, the mother, decided to do some research on the house and found out that it had a long history with another family. And it was a gruesome history as well. A lot of deaths, a lot of terrible, terrible stories, terrible deaths, including the deaths of children in a nearby creek. Now, the story itself depicts an entity known as Bathsheba, who targets the mother, which is believed to be because she saw herself as a lady of the house, and then Carolyn, her presence was perceived as a challenge on that title. But it was actually discovered that for real there was a lady named Bathsheba Sherman who lived in the house during the mid-1800s. She was rumoured to have been a Satanist, if that's how you pronounce that. But just to cut this story short, Ed and Lorraine made several trips to the Perron family home over the course of the years, and I believe in the film it was actually ended with an attempt at an exorcism. In real life, it's said that Ed wouldn't have attempted that. He didn't do that because he believed that it had to be performed by a Catholic priest. But instead, in real life, it was actually a seance that went disastrously disastrously wrong, in which, witnessed by one of Carolyn's daughters, Carolyn herself was apparently possessed, speaking in a foreign tongue, a tongue nobody ever heard before, in a different voice, picked up and slung across the room. After which Roger, the husband, decided to oust Ed and Lorraine for good, fearing for his wife's sanity, of course, and quite rightly so. The parent family did remain in the house for a while because of money, but eventually in 1980 they moved out, ending the hauntings for good. What I love about this story is that they actually managed to achieve their own happy ending. They moved out and got rid of the darkness, the hauntings for good. They saved themselves. But what I love about the paranormal investigation side of it is the date, 1971 and onwards towards 1980, in that era. If you think about the technology then, the level of technology in that era, that's what I find amazing. They were still doing what they could though. I know there's more stories out there. There's more evidence of paranormal investigation in the early years and more stories from ancient times. And I'll do my best to find them for you. But I think that'll do for now. I hope you've enjoyed what I've picked up so far. And I'll see you next time for a little bit more history. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Today we take a look at the Fool card. The Fool card is numbered 0. The Fool is depicted as an idiot or joker, in which form his presence survives in an ordinary playing cards deck. He is a youth setting out on a path of discovery, yet, in putting his best foot forward, he strides towards a precipice, blissfully unaware of the dog snapping at his heels. Upright meaning a new opportunity that offers potential, but could involve risk. An unexpected turn of events could bring you excitement and rejuvenation, but look before you leap. Do not view others' concerns for you as an irritant. If a venture is worthwhile, it will withstand your caution. On another level, when the Fool appears in the upright position, it also indicates amusement and spontaneity, so you may soon enjoy the company of entertaining individuals or events. In a reading, the outcome of the meaning of the card will all depend on the surrounding cards. The reversed meaning is a warning against rash decisions. Resist pressure from others until you have the facts, rather than falling headlong into a situation that threatens to overwhelm you. Think before you act. No matter how beguiling an opportunity appears, it is only appearance and not reality. So, to round up, the key words for the Fool are innocence, beginnings, risk, the unexpected, and folly.
Hello and welcome to Behind the Scenes with M&A. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our future investigations and what they will entail. Now, as Chris said last week, we have decided to finish season 3 and all our future investigations will be going into a series 4. Now, we've decided to do things a little bit different to how we would normally conduct an investigation. And as a team, we've had a little chat about what we want to achieve, what we think is good technique, and so on. And we have just come up with a sort of plan. So the plan is When we go to a location, we will split up into separate teams, whether that be pairs or dependent on how many of us there are at the time. And one team will focus on using modern day equipment, and the other team will focus on more traditional methods. So I've laid out a bit of our equipment here today, just to give you a little tour of what will be what. And so let's start with the traditional methods. So of course we have Mary here, and we also have some rosary beads that we had lying around in the office, and those are trigger objects. So obviously Mary already has a spirit, but we can also use her as a trigger object as well as other items that are relevant to the time period or to the location. So trigger objects will be a big part of what we do in that section. So other traditional methods, we have pendulum, we have our new spirit dice, we have Ouija board, and we have a little bit of spirit writing. So this is like a little homemade planchette I made to hold a pen. We'll also try techniques such as spirit writing and drawing. So whereas a member of the team will hold a pen and some paper and sort of try and get into a kind of meditative state, and then see if anything channels through them to write or draw. We've also ordered a scrying mirror that's being custom made for us, which we can't wait to get. And we'll be adding some other items to that side of the kit, for example dowsing rods and more trigger objects, I think, and anything else that we think would be good. But not only the items, but the traditional method will focus a lot more on just calling out and sitting quietly and waiting to see if things happen. And the plan is we won't be using sort of cameras as a handheld. We will probably set up some locked off cameras in the location prior to starting the investigation, and then whichever team does the traditional methods will use the locked off cameras to capture any evidence. Now over to the more modern day equipment. We've got quite a little bit more here to play with than the traditional methods. We have, of course, the digital voice recorders, spirit box, K2 meters, temperature gun, motion sensor lights, digital cameras for still photos, the full spectrum camera, the grid lights, mobile phone for apps. We're still not sold on apps, but we may give a couple a try if any catch our eye. And then of course over there at the front we've got the SLS camera, which we still have yet to use. We'll also possibly be hoping to add a couple of other items to this side of the kit, so more trigger objects, but sort of things like cat balls that light up and things like that, and also a REM pod. So there's a few items we want to add to both sides of the kit, which will come in time. So for the meantime, this is what we'll go with, and I'm really looking forward to see if we get different results from different techniques. So whether certain locations are more active using the modern day equipment, or whether some are more active using the traditional methods. So it's going to be a really interesting season. We have a few locations lined up. We will be repeating a couple of locations that we've done in the past, just because we have Fran on the team now, and There's a number of places that she'd like to go and that we'd like her to go to see how she feels when she's at that location. So like Chris said, we'll hope to get the first episode out by August. It may come sooner than that, but we want to sort of build a few backlog of episodes so that when we finally do start releasing them, we can release them on a regular basis rather than have to wait weeks or months between episodes. So we did plan on going out last week. We didn't in the end. Hopefully we may be going out this week. So we'll let you know anyway. And yeah, so for everyone who's watched our videos so far, thank you for your support. Season 4 hopefully is going to be our best one yet. We have lots of good plans, lots of good ideas, and we're going to get them out for you, and hopefully you'll enjoy them. So that's all I've got time for in this section. Hope you enjoy the rest of M&A TV, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.
Colour is essentially a vibration of light, and the human body responds to a whole rainbow of colour. The properties of the colours are as follows. Silvery grey and metallic have properties of transmutation, traditionally imparting invisibility, creating excellent journeying crystals. Black is strongly protective and grounding, entraps and transmutes negative energies. Black happens to be an excellent detoxifier. This is why onyx is seen as a protective crystal. It's great to have one with you when communing with spirits to ward off any negative energies. Brown resonates with the Earth Star chakra, strongly cleansing and purifying, grounding and protecting. It absorbs toxic and negative energies and induces stability and centeredness. Tiger Eye is a great example of a brown coloured crystal. Pink, exceedingly gentle, carries the essence of unconditional love, provides comfort and alleviates anxiety. Excellent first aid in emotional healing. Overcomes loss, dispels trauma and promotes forgiveness and attunement to universal love. Pictured here is rose quartz. Peach is gently energizing. It unites the heart and sacral chakras, combining love and action. Pictured here is peach agate. It has beautiful bands of peach to orange colour and white as well. Red resonates with the base and sacral chakras, energizes and activates, strengthening the libido and stimulating creativity. It draws off or generates energy as required. Traditionally treats the blood, hemorrhages and inflammation. Personally, my favourite red crystal is jasper. Orange is aligned with the sacral chakra, bringing vibrant vitality, stimulating creativity and assertiveness. It grounds projects in the physical world. Sunstone is a great orange crystal to have in your collection. Yellow crystals resonate with the solar plexus and the mind. They instill clarity, balance emotions and intellect. Golden crystals have long been associated with wealth and abundance. Green crystals are linked to the heart chakra. Green provides emotional healing and activates compassion. It is a calming colour and cleansing, and it helps to instill tranquility. If you find yourself being drawn towards green crystals, you are probably quite a passionate person. Turquoise and teals help activate the third eye. It's helpful for uniting heart and intuition, induces profound peace and relaxation, resonates with higher levels of being, stimulates spiritual awareness and metaphysical abilities, drawing higher consciousness down to earth and anchoring it. Blue helps align the throat and third eye chakras, stimulates self-expression, assists in communication, links to the highest state of consciousness, stimulates intuition and metaphysical abilities, much like turquoise, bringing about mystical perceptions. Purple is in line with the higher chakra and multi-dimensional realities. It draws spiritual energy into the material plane and opens metaphysical abilities. A lot of psychics like to have purple gemstones, such as amethyst, to help with their spiritual abilities. White is in tune with the higher chakras and the highest realms of being. This is probably why we tend to envisage spirits as being white. It is a colour of purity and of cleansing. White crystals are great for enlightenment. Clear crystals, such as clear quartz, are powerful energizers. They purify and heal the aura and the physical body. They radiate energy out into the environment, carrying vibrations of pure light and higher consciousness. They are also great at aiding with other crystals' powers. Combination and bicoloured or multicoloured crystals create exciting possibilities, synergizing the qualities of their component colours or crystals and enabling them to work together in unison. They are often more effective than the individual parts, with the vibration being raised to a higher frequency. Love and light.
Welcome back to our journey down Ghostly Lane. As we near the end of our journey, I'm going to pick out the last two great stories that Season 2 has to offer. This story is one of White Lady's Priory in Cosford. We have a friend of ours and skeptic from Shell's work, Paul. We brought him along because he exhibited an interest in joining us to see what it was like. As we begin together, we're trying a bit of DVR, a bit of Q&A to see if we can get anything back on the device after our questions. To be fairly honest, to begin with, it's very quiet. we hardly get anything back at all. It isn't long though before we switch tactics and move over to the spirit box. It is hit and miss for a while, but we do start to get a few strange responses. Some of them seem to be quite odd, whilst others would seem to pop up and sort of make some sense. But it was very few and far between, and it would prove to be a very quiet night. And we wouldn't realise just why it was going to be quiet until much later on. We tried time and time again to get responses, but unfortunately most of the night was very quiet, so after a while we decided to draw this night to a close, so we could come back and try again, with another more interesting tactic in mind. And we're back with our new tactic. This time Shell is in the Priory on her own. This is because we figured the presence of men in a ladies' priory was scaring the spirits away, reacting to the male presence and leaving. So we decided to send Shell in on her own to see what results she could get. And it did make a difference. Straight away, Shell is into it with the DVR whilst panning around. And the energy is instantly different. A lot more creepier than before. Probably somewhat due to being on her own, but something did feel different to Shell. From time to time, she would wander around the Priory in an attempt to see who was there or what was going on. Now well into her stride with the DVR, she's asking questions and seeing if she can get some responses. This tactic was one of the ones we started to build, to try and see if we could get some sort of action. And it would be this night that we would start to get a positive result. As Shell continues to try and use the DVR to get responses, she comes across a recording that pumps out a response. Finally, clear cut, it says yes. There's always been a single male spirit that always comes forward and responds, and it looks like he's back and speaking to Shell. The night continues, and Shell starts to look at her surroundings, keeping an eye on what's going on down the other end of the Priory, in response to certain noises and movements at the other end. Shell started to do some spirit box, and as she gets going, she's starting to ask some questions, but before she can get right into it, the speaker on top of the spirit box moves of its own accord. Trying to ascertain what exactly had happened, Cheryl managed to confirm that the ground was completely flat and that there should have been no reason for the speaker to move. It was as though somebody was trying to tell her that they were now present, and that they were none too keen on talking through the spirit box. Cheryl continues her efforts to get through to some of the nuns of White Lady's Priory. She continues to pan around, observing her surroundings, before eventually giving up and moving on. Nothing would prepare Cheryl for what would happen next, though. As she's talking to the camera, explaining what's going on, out of nowhere, a piece of equipment turns itself on and scares the living daylights out of her. That equipment would be the spirit box. Out of nowhere, the spirit box just activates and white noise comes out of it with no explanation, scaring the absolute bejesus out of Cheryl. She quickly rectifies the situation and carries on speaking to the camera. Still, with an odd feeling that someone is right close to her. Now, considering bringing the session to a close, Cheryl makes one or two more attempts to make contact with the spirits of White Lady's Priory, to no avail. But there are a few instances where strange orbs or light play or movement seems to occur. But, alas, she ends her solo session and brings us back into the picture, so we can finish off the night as a team. So we move straight into the investigation, following the same steps as Shell did, starting off with the DVR, with a bit of Q&A in an attempt to get a response. Now that the men are back on the scene, the Priory goes very, very quiet and very calm. As we try to use the DVR to get a response, we get nothing. So it doesn't take long for us to switch over to the spirit box once again, in a second attempt of the night to talk to the spirits, now that the men have come back into the Priory. And admittedly, it does take some time before we get a response. But with a little faith and perseverance, our determination is rewarded. This happens when we press on with the spirit box, and in answer to one of our questions, the abbot, as if we may be speaking to the person who led this priory. Is this true? Did we speak to someone of authority who finally was ready to confront us? Maybe. over time, it would become clearer and clearer that whilst we were not always being spoken to, we were most certainly still being followed around the priory. Strange things would happen, strange noises, strange feelings. We would catch glimpses of things, but not be able to explain it. We would see things watching back the video, strange lights, strange anomalies that we weren't able to explain, which would all point to one inescapable truth. That somebody didn't want us there, and they were too afraid to come anywhere near us. Everyone except this male protector who was very keen for us to leave. For the entire time, we've still got the spirit box running, still hoping that we can have a conversation with somebody here at the Priory. From time to time, we do get a response, but it seems to be more of the same. Gestures for us to leave. Responses that seem to indicate that we're not wanted here. There are some responses that we were never able to really pick up on or understand. But they all seem to point to a final truth. It really was a case of the lady nuns of this priory never wanted to be anywhere near us. And that maybe it was Shell on her own that made them more at ease because she was a woman. But certainly now that the men were here, we were maybe regarded as a threat. So in all this time, the only voice that we've heard was a male voice. But it's time to draw the investigation to a close. We've done all we can and got all the responses we can. And we've had a good time here. However, there is a story that I'd like to tell. This story takes us back to the early days of the group. We brought Brian here to White Lady's Priory. It was myself, Shell, Jodie, and Brian. Now sadly, back in those days our cameras weren't quite as good as they are now. Their ability to pick up audio was severely limited, so the episode itself was scrapped because of it. But the story goes like this. We left a serious spirit box session to the end of the night, and it was much the same, no responses, no interaction, except I called out to the leader of the ladies to come forward and to not be afraid. I would not harm her, and what was there to lose? And so I asked, "Are you here?" To which she replied very clearly, "Yes, I am. Please leave." Very nicely. So we did. The best response I've ever had. But that's all for this episode of A Journey Down Ghostly Lane. Join me next time for our last stop on this ghostly journey in our memories.